All right. It says that we are live. It says that we are connected. So I'm just going to trust it and say hello and welcome to everyone who is watching the Written in Melanin channel, wherever this day may have found you. I'm so glad that you are here. Today is a special day because I am back with the one, the only Amanda Ross, and we are going to be talking about her second book in her Which Kind series, To Ilaris and Desperation. And if you guys have been on the channel for any length of time, you know that she's been on the channel before, which if I had been wise, I would have linked the video to that in the description box. Future Chelsea will do that. And and we talked about her first book, To Astera with Love, and obviously this is a sequel to that book, so there will be light spoilers for To Astera, because that's how numerical chronological things work. But this will be a mostly spoiler-free conversation of To Ilaris and Desperation, so if you have not picked it up yet, I'm sorry, you should really do that right now. Like, I encourage you to actually just open a new tab and go ahead and purchase the book. There's a link to that in the description. Current Chelsea remembered to do that. So, that being said, hello, welcome, and also my mom is here. Hi, Mom! How you doing? Good morning. Oh, and this is a live chat, you guys, so if you are here and watching live, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and I will ask them as they come across. Share your thoughts, opinions, ideas, so have you. You know how this works. Okay, that's my whole spiel. Welcome, Amanda.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. It is early, so I have my coffee and my merch,
I
my
love
two
it.
Ilaris merch cup.
Can,
So,
is that cup
good.
purchasable? Can we get that from somewhere?
I got you.
Okay.
I got you.
Okay. Because that's what I needed to know. Oh, Ben's here too. Hi, Ben. Okay. So, as I said, we're here to talk about your book, and let's just start with the beginning. Like, I know what it's about because I was blessed, you guys. She sent me an advanced reader copy, so I've actually been reading it, and Sheila's here too. Sorry, I'm sorry. My family is showing up, and I have to shout them out when they're here. I apologize.
Hey fam, that's awesome. Yes. Look, it's 8 in the morning. All my family's still asleep. They're gonna catch the replay here. So
That's right. You're in California. Like, it's 11
yeah.
o'clock on the East Coast, and I'm just like, hey, y'all showing up. I appreciate you.
No, my brother was up texting me like midnight last night. He's not awake.
Yeesh. Those days are so far behind me, and I'm like, I'm not even that old, but like midnight, 1 o'clock, whew, buddy, that's way past my bedtime. But, okay, so To Hilarious and Desperation got kind of off track, but your elevator pitch for the book for anyone who has not read it, if you had to, you got like 2 minutes to tell them what the book is about, what would you tell them?
So for To Astera or To Ilaris, the
To
second book?
Hilarious. Did I say To
Okay.
Astera? I'm sorry.
No, no, no. You said Ilaris. I just
Okay.
wanted to be sure. Get
Yeah.
my pitch right.
You can do both. Book one and book two.
Well, if you haven't read the series, To Astera with Love, it just follows a young or 21-year-old witch named Mercury as he tries to get he and his friends to safety after making a big mistake at a party. And he exists in a world where there is a vampire president. Vampires and witches hate each other. Drugs are legal, and he gives all of his friends magical powers to help him essentially keep them safe and the vampires off their trail. And Ilaris follows Mercury and his friends in the aftermath of the events at Astera, Astera being a huge gathering of all witch kind here in America. And he is protesting against the rules and laws put in place by the vampire president and the inaction of the Witches' Council, which is the governing body of all witches. And there's a lot more magic in this book. There are magic potions. There's a magical ritual that happens in a very interesting place. And yeah, just a lot more of that. And you'll follow Mercury on his journey and find out if he's able to lead this movement that he started.
And I can vouch you guys that, first of all, I love To Astera. Honestly, if you like fantasy of any kind, especially where the protagonist is older, then I always recommend this book, because if you guys, like I said, if you've been on the channel any length of time, you know that I love the fantasy genre, but one of my biggest gripes with it sometimes is that it's very either I'm 16 and I have no idea what I'm doing, or it's pure adult and it takes a completely different turn. And to
Mm-hmm.
Astera and to Ilaris are both in that sweet spot where it's like you have college age kids who are figuring out their life and where they fit, along with all of the fantasy elements. So definitely a good book. Both of those are available on the Melanin Library. So literally melaninlibrary.com. And then To Ilaris and To Astera are both on the homepage currently. So you don't have to look far. um, but that being said, Amanda, like you were talking about how the world has potions, it has a governing body, it's got a vampire for president. Like you've thought out this world incredibly. Like what was that like for you? And like how did you decide on which aspects to take more fantastical, like a vampire president, and which to leave more concrete?
Oh, that's a really great question. See, this is why I like talking to you, because you come through with all of these good questions. Well, I'm a plotter by nature, and as a result, I wanted to make sure that I had everything together ahead of time before I started writing. So, really, I just started playing with different ideas of. Um, I knew I wanted witches, I knew I wanted vampires, and I thought, how could I make them clash? And being that I started writing this book when Trump was in office,
Hmm.
I thought, let's make a vampire president, because it's kind of like a little true right now, right? And so that's where that came from. And then because of that, I made vampires and witches natural enemies. And I just thought, well, witches might have their own kind of people laying down the law. In a lot of other type of fantasy, or we have, like in Charm, they have the elders,
Mm-hmm.
and in other groups there's, even I think in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there was like a whole council that
Mm-hmm.
was like governing, what Buffy could and couldn't do, and in other fantasy fiction. So I thought this would kind of be a natural fit, that they're a governing body, but they're still limited, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
people that are witches still have to follow American law
Mm-hmm.
above, witch law. And so I thought that could be also another source of tension there between, witch laws and human laws. And then I just started writing and having fun with implementing different laws, right? Like witches and not being able to practice magic in public, or the potential of them having to wear some kind of dog tag that identifies them as witches, so that people can stay away, and that they're singled out that way. um, Laws that prevent vampires from, like, just going out and biting people,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what you would think would happen, right? But
Right.
like, I had to put that in place to be able to control them, and limit their power. I say limit because they still do it anyway, right?
Right.
Like, of course.
And as I've been reading To Alaris, it's something that I've really enjoyed, like just seeing you get into like how there is a vampire for president, but there are still rules and restrictions that govern them. That I'll say, as Black folk, we understand what reverse racism is, and I like how you incorporated that into your book, and how in both
Hmm.
situations, fantastical or reality, it doesn't exist. But yeah, I'll say
Hmm.
that. You got the question. Should the books be read in sequence?
Yes, yes. There's a lot of things that happen in Alaris that are directly related to the events that happen in Astera. So if you
Mm-hmm.
don't read Astera first, you'll be a little lost. I do my best to kind of explain, but I'm never one to info dump,
Mm-hmm.
so you do have to read them in sequence. But they're not huge tomes. They're, just over 200 pages. The
Yeah.
first book is. The second book is like 270 pages. So, they're, I've been told, pretty quick, easy reads. So could be
I
good to kill in a weekend or something.
I could definitely agree to that. I read us to Astera in two sittings because adult life. If I was still a teenager, I would have read it in one sitting. But the way my life is set
Right.
up,
I miss those times.
but Ooh, I had a question and my thought process went left. Sorry. But um speaking of, the continuation of it, what was it like coming back to write the second book? Because if you guys did not know, Amanda did write and participate in an anthology called Girls with of Might and Magic.
Hmm.
And so what was that like, finishing to Astera, and then I follow you on Twitter and Instagram, and like I know you, right? So I know that you've got other projects in the works
Yeah.
that you put on hold to come back to so you could write to Ilaris. So what was that like,
Hmm.
switching it up and then coming back to write a continuation of the story?
I think giving myself that space and time to step away from this world was good because I was able to draw on some of the other ideas I had for short stories. For the book that I'm currently writing, I used a little bit of the ideas I had for this book into to Ilaris, and I think I was able to come back with a, I would say, a more mature eye, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't just jump straight into it. And so I was also able to take in a lot of the events that were happening in the world and a lot of the things that are happening in my personal life and incorporate them into Alaris. And I won't lie, it was much harder to write
Mm-hmm.
because it's, the second book, people have already read the first book, already feel a way about it, love it, hate it, whatever. And so I really had to shut down those voices
Mm-hmm.
of, are people going to love this? Are people not going to love this? Am I pushing this farther? Am I making this better? I had to shut all that out. And I'm a naturally anxious person, and so I for sure every time I was talking to my therapist was like, "So this is something I'm worried about." And she's like, "I know."
That makes sense because I've heard that a lot on the interwebs, that writing the second book is a lot harder than writing the first, because when you're writing the first one you're just going at it, like the world is
Hmm.
uniquely yours, it hasn't been out in the
Yeah.
world. But then once people have opinions and expectations and thoughts on it, you start thinking, okay, am I satisfying the reader with what I'm coming up with next? So honestly, I find it impressive that you were able to do that. And you talked about taking a break and
Yeah.
taking in, I guess, getting more perspective on your writing by living and working on other
Hmm.
things. Um, did you find it difficult when you did come back to write Mercury, especially with their age range? And because you as a person had matured, did you find it more difficult to go back to where they were at to continue the story?
Coming back to the characters, no, because it felt very much like just coming back to some friends, or I mean, I guess like niece and nephews, because I have like a lot of nieces and nephews are in their early 20s, so it felt like, oh, I'm just going to visit them.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to it. I think the world itself and some of the events that happen in the book were very hard to write. You haven't gotten there, but there's a scene in the later half of the book that was the most difficult scene I've ever had to write, to
Oh
be honest.
gosh.
It took me so many different rounds to write. I really was second guessing myself as I was writing this, and I'm so happy with the way that it turned out. Um, Once you get there, message me and I'll come
Okay.
purse for you.
Now I'm
But
like anxious about it.
but it there was ups and downs. Like I said, the characters were easier to come back to. The world a little bit, but it was just certain scenes because I knew I wanted to push the magic element further in this book. That was harder, you know.
Yeah, I can see that. Even in the beginning, I I've always found your characters to be relatable, especially Mercury,
Hmm.
and I can see the the tone shift, I guess, from Astera to Ilaris, and I'm appreciating it. I'm still pretty much in like the upper middle half of the book
Hmm.
currently, but it's just, it pulls you in. Like you have a way of writing that really pulls the reader in, and like
Thank
it's
you.
just like this is the world. And I love that with fantasy, where it's just like there are certain things that are just understood, and then there are certain things that once it's explained, it's just like, ah, okay, I get it, that makes sense.
Hmm.
And even though it's urban fantasy, it's not the kind of urban fantasy where you think you get overwhelmed with it, if that makes sense. So kudos to you
Yeah.
for that, and I wanted to let
Thank
you
you.
know. Yeah. um, So you have two questions in the chat. The first one is, did you have to continue to develop the rules of the world in your second book, or did you already have a complete idea of how everything works in your first book?
Oh, that's a great question. So yes, I did have to continue to develop the rules in this world, and there will be a third book. Sorry, there will be a third book. So I imagine I will do that as well for the third book. And I kind of like that because it feels like, you're always learning, things change, laws change, people's viewpoints change. And so I think being stagnant in that isn't for me. And it allows me to really, I think, pull my fingers and root out into other aspects of this world. I mean, in this book, here's a little spoiler, there is a power stripping ceremony, and that's light power stripping is mentioned in the first book, so that's another spoiler. But in this book you actually get to see what that is, and that was one of my favorite scenes to write. Just kind of thinking about how it would work and the logistics of it and what it would take to remove somebody's power, their, what makes them unique in this world, I guess, according to these characters. So definitely having to continue to evolve and rewrite. Right. And thankfully, I have a whole huge Google Doc with all the laws and the rules and all that world building. So I just had that up every time I would write, and especially when I was doing the rewrites.
Okay, I definitely want to come back to that, just for any writers who watch this in the future about like keeping your writing process. But the other question that you had in the chat was, do you have to immerse yourself into the character in order to stay focused?
Oh, that's another. See, good questions all around.
See, the fam comes through. Let me tell you.
That's a great question. Yes. So I mentioned in my the last time we spoke, the character of Mercury is heavily influenced by my brother. I have two brothers. One of them influenced Mercury, and a little bit of myself in Mercury with some of his more like anxious kind of moments. I think that's what it is using a lot of, especially in this book, my personal struggles with anxiety shine through Mercury in this book. And even in the first book, where there's moments where he's wondering, how can I lead these people? He's got younger sibling syndrome. I have 5 siblings, so I have that 5 times over, where it's like they're there, they can do it. There's always somebody that is accomplished or has done something ahead of me, so there's a safety in that. And then when you have to chart your own territory, it's nerve-wracking because nobody's done that for you before in the family. And so that, those are some of the things that I've reflected in Mercury. Some of the other characters, not so much, mostly Mercury. A little bit of Sloane, in that it's more of like a wishful thinking that everybody could be as brash and as just unapologetic as Sloane.
I feel like that's the perfect way to describe her, as unapologetic. And I
Yes.
love Sloane for that, because I feel like everything that Mercury is, Sloane is really that counterbalance that he needs in his life, where Mercury is like, okay, let me think this through. Sloane's like, why are we thinking? Let's get it done.
Yeah.
And she's very honest and straightforward. Like, she's going to call a spade. And I love that about her, because again, you need people like that in your life, but there's a difference between, like, what is it? Brutally honest and just like, good honest, like just an honest person. And I feel like Sloane is just an honest person. She's not out to hurt your feelings, but she's not afraid to hurt your feelings to tell you the truth,
Yeah. And I think when it comes to people who say, I'm just brutally honest, it's, to me, you're more interested in the brutality than the honesty, because you're more interested in saying what you want to say, people's feelings be darned, than saying, I need to be honest, but there's always a way and an opportunity to be tactful. I say always, but if somebody's in your face or somebody's like racist or homophobic, you don't need to be tactful.
There's a limit to it, but I get what you mean. Like, there's a time and a place, and I'll even say a person, to be brutally honest with. Like, I feel like brutal honesty should also be reserved for those people that you are super close with, who you've tried tactful honesty with, and it did not get through. you
Yeah.
know, but talking to a stranger and being brutally honest, nobody asks for that. Nobody needs that. Keep that to
Yep.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Unless, like you said, someone's in your face, because then they can catch these hands. But.
All day.
And Read Love Listen is also here. Hi, Read Love Listen. How you doing?
Hey.
And she said that she agrees that Mercury is very relatable, and she loves when she can dive right into a story and the story feels so familiar and like it could really happen in our world, which I will also second that. Like, I love that you learn some things. I don't want to spoil anything for To Ilaris, but you learn a couple of things with the ceremony that Amanda mentioned earlier about who can interact with the witch community and the vampire community. And basically, it's you either know or you don't, and you either interact or you can't. And it kind of feels like what's happening in the story is something that could happen, and we as non-magical people just don't know about it, which is also really nice, because when you, like I said, when you feel like you're not being overwhelmed by how much disbelief you have to suspend for fantasy to be in the real world, it's a much, much, much better experience, in my opinion. You know, like, I feel like I could go to California and just see witches protesting and be like, oh, okay, cool. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, because they're not all, the witches. I think we as Black women have to be aware of our intersectionality in a way that other people don't, and so I think that that's also something I wanted to carry in this book. That especially Mercury is, and his father, they're fully aware of the fact that they're not just witches; they're Black men. In his father's case, he's bisexual, so he's also queer. So there's all these different communities that you belong with and that you ride for. And in Mercury's case, he's not just looking out for witches, he's looking out for like Black witches and brown witches specifically before, anything else. And I really wanted to highlight that because, like I said, like, other people don't have to be aware of the fact that your identity is layered, but it occurs at the same time. I saw a tweet the other day where somebody was asking, like, what's more difficult, being a woman or being Black? And it's like,
You can't
but
not be
all
either.
of my all of my identities come into the room with me. It's never, I'm not just a woman one day and Black the next. Like, my and the response was, my identity as a woman is informed by the fact that I am Black. And I thought that was such a beautiful way of saying that. And I would say that's kind of how it is with Mercury is as well. Like, his identity as a witch, as a Black man, it's all informed by all of his being.
And I love that, because you actually, I say you, it's in the book. Like, it's like explicitly at one point that he's like, he is aware of the fact that at any given moment he has to be the entire representative for all of his identities, both individually and at one time. And there's a moment where he's just like, I just want to go somewhere and be myself, because with what's going on into Ilaris, and this isn't spoilery, but after the events that follow Astera, Mercury is basically at odds with the council on certain issues. And as a young person, especially in this environment, he is protesting that. And that's kind of the focal point of To Ilaris. And as he's going through that, he is realizing and coming to terms with a lot of things about himself, it feels like. And also the repercussions of being an activist, because I feel like sometimes that can be romanticized. Like, go out, march in the streets, do the protest, use your voice. But that when you are heard, and there comes a response. And just being aware of that, and that you have to be a little bit more farsighted than just the immediate, and him coming face to face with that reality. At least that's what I've got so far. Me trying to use my big words on a Saturday morning. But
no, that's very much what it is, because I think, how many times have we seen, over the last year, especially people who are activists, not even just over the last year, but people who are activists that, they're using their voice, and then somebody takes issue with something that they said or something that happened in their past, and then they have to reconcile. And in this age of social media and mass communication and everything, anything could come back and people could feel a way about it. And so I did want to explore that it's not just activism, isn't just you're out using your voice, it's you're visible. You were in the public sphere. And for somebody who's not used to that, for somebody who has anxiety, for somebody who has all of these different things, it can be very challenging. And so I didn't want to just have this be a story where Mercury's like this triumphant activist and going viral. He's a person, and he has all of these different things that he's struggling with.
And that is the beauty of your book, honestly, is because I've read books where when you are the chosen one, you're supposed to be happy that you are the chosen one, and the repercussions of the what you have to do doesn't really sink in for the character. Like the negative aspects of being in the spotlight are never explored. And what I like about Mercury is that he is at all times wholly a human being. Like, he is a witch, he is a black man, he is, you know, the son of his father, the nephew of his aunts. He is, you know, who he is. He has all of these ties and connections, but at the end of the day, he's still like, I'm a person. And this kind of fame has repercussions. But that being said, I could talk about Mercury forever. I think I did when we talked about Too Hysterical. So I love Mercury. He's a great character. Honestly, pick up the book, if nothing else, just for him and to read a very well written character. But because of that, that kind of brings me to my next point. You mentioned how you have like a Bible, the book Bible, essentially, of all the stuff that goes into Ilaris and Astera and the world. And can you talk about a little bit what your process is like? Because I know in the future, you know, other writers may be watching this and may want to know.
Sure. Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I'm a plotter, so I plot everything out. I'm pretty meticulous. Before I start a project, I do the world building. I pretty much only write fantasy, so each story, each project has a little bit of a Bible. Even the short story I did for Girls of Might and Magic, I had a Bible of like what the rules are with the magic and the wolves and all that stuff that's in there. So I started with just doing some research on magic systems, elemental magic, excuse me, different powers and things like that. Also doing research on vampires, because I feel like in order to subvert something, you have to actually know as much about that as possible to make it brand new.
Absolutely.
So I did a lot of research on vampires, which is all of that. And then in my document, I have just kind of a list of all the different powers I wanted to include. And because this is elemental magic, and because the powers come from a specific element, everybody has, you know, all the witches have a guiding element. I kind of sat down and like assigned all the different powers to the different elements. I was writing things about the Witches' Council, writing a little bit about their history, which you can learn about. There's an article I wrote into A Stare with Love that goes a little bit more into that history of the Witches' Council. But then the other part of that too is all of the politics, because this book does have a lot of politics. There's a vampire president, so I talk quite a bit about bills being passed, the Supreme Court, the midterms, and all of that. So, you know, I just did a video for my YouTube channel the other day about world building in modern fantasy, because I feel like there's this idea that you only world build when you're doing epic fantasy, but that's not true. Whatever kind of fantasy you do, you have to world build, and that comes with a lot of research, especially if you are writing something you're unfamiliar with. I'm not a political science major, so I had to do a bunch of research into politics, into how bills are, you know, we're talking like Schoolhouse Rock, watching like I'm just a bill.
Honestly, that's where my mind went as soon as you were like bills and laws. I'm like, I'm just a bill on Capitol Hill.
Yes. You know, bringing it back. So I had to do all of that research, and it's all in this big, huge document. And also, I mean, I'm like obsessed with names, so I was writing all the different names that I like, all the different occurrences, and this is also where I keep all of my ideas. So as I'm writing these books, I would have ideas that I wanted to, you know, put in future books, or maybe this would work, and that way, as I was writing this book or starting to outline Ilaris, I was able to pull from that document of, okay, what's the next logical conclusion for this to happen? What is something cool that could happen? How can I kind of, you know, push things forward? So that will also be what I'm doing for the third book.
I love it. I love that you're, I guess, honest about how much research goes into it, even though you're writing a fantasy, because I feel like sometimes as readers, it's easy to overlook the fact that like a lot
Mhm.
of work went into this. Like it seems seamless, but in order to make it that way, you have to know a lot of things that don't actually make it into the book. I guess knowing that both as a
Yeah.
reader and as a writer, because my next book is also going to be a fantasy. So I've been kind of learning that for
Yay.
myself. And it's just like, even though it's not going in the book, I know this now, you know?
Yes.
And I guess, especially this question is more for you because I can't do contemporary. What you do, I can't do. I give you kudos because I respect the skill it takes to do what you're doing. Um, but you're writing like a modern fantasy, like it's set in the modern world. So, throughout it, they're using social media and they're referring to, how it is in the world. Like the fact that, we're in a world of remote work, you know?
Hmm.
And how do you feel about that? Because I know that some people are always, they think about being quote unquote timeless, right? And so
Yeah.
some of the advice that floats around Twitter is don't include things that could date your book, but you embrace it fully. So what was that coming to that decision like?
Well, I think that that's okay advice depending on what you're writing, but this book is very heavily influenced by the now,
Mm-hmm.
and by the events that are happening. Like in the first book, I'm talking about Twitter and Instagram, and in the second book, I'm explicitly mentioning TikTok because
Mm-hmm.
that TikTok is that girl right now,
Yeah.
and especially with the fact that my characters are Gen Zers. They're not millennials. They're not born in 1980, and my book needed to reflect that, the fact that they are young, because I wanted Gen Zers to relate to it now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are themes that are in this book that are timeless.
Absolutely.
The anxiety, the leadership, the activism, all of these different things are timeless, and I feel like it would be it would be foolish of me to have a contemporary book where I'm not talking about social media, because I don't think social media is going anywhere anytime soon. The apps might change, the names might change, but I think it's still going to be around 10, 15, 20 years from now. So I
Oh yeah.
think people are still going to be able to read this and relate to, hey, you went viral. Hey, this hashtag, and people, let's post this selfie and all that. I think people are still going to be able to relate to that years from now.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree, and I'm glad that you have that take on it because, whenever I see advice like that and I read a book like yours, it reminds me of like whenever I read a book and I see someone like getting called down to the kitchen to take a phone call. Like no one does that anymore. Everybody has cell phones. You don't have to take a call on the landline that's actually connected to the wall, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's just like I feel like even people who are not in that time, who didn't grow up in that time, they understand the significance of it,
Yeah.
and I think 20 years from now people are still going to be picking up to Astera, and even if Facebook finally dies they're still going to know what it is, or if TikTok isn't the thing anymore, because at one point it was like what, Snapchat, like everybody was on Snapchat, and
Mhm.
does it still exist? Absolutely. Does anybody talk about it anymore? Not that I'm aware of, you
Yeah.
know
Yeah, and I wanted it to be relatable, like I said, to people now. And I think, like you said, people still in the future. Because for me, when we're talking about making things timeless, but then to me, something timeless isn't that you have a rotary phone in the next room and you're paying for minutes for your 10 cents a text,
yeah.
That's not timeless. That is a very specific moment in time that as a middling millennial. I don't know. I'm 32, so I don't know where I fall
I
in
don't
the
know.
millennial
We're
bracket.
we're millennials. We're here.
But I understand that, but I feel like it would take somebody out of the story. I think that if you're not trying to make your book current, if it's modern, then you run the risk of taking your characters out of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather focus on what's happening now so that it's relatable to people now than to try to make it timeless. And then number one, put way more work in my plate because I'm already doing a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
And number two, have people reading it now be like, no, what is that? What is a tape? What is a cassette? I don't do that. And them go, well, this isn't 20 2022 and not want to read the story.
Yeah. I get that, and that's why I said I appreciate your book and the fact that you made the decision that you made. And whenever I see advice like that, the advice for writing advice is like, it's good advice, but not every advice needs to be taken, you know.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that with your book, like, you don't get to decide what's timeless or not. You don't get to decide if your book will withstand the test of time. All you can do is write the best book possible for the people who are reading it right now. And I think you are absolutely killing it with that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it, honestly. Like, I'm not brutally honest, but I am honest. If I didn't mean it, I wouldn't say it. I would find some very creative way to circumvent that. But,
like saying somebody's not angry, they're passionate.
Yeah, no, they're not angry. They're just, talking really loudly. They're not arguing. Read Love Listen had the question of, is your book Bible written in a notebook or typed on a computer?
Oh, it is typed on a computer because my handwriting has been compared to doctor's scribble.
Oh.
I know what it is, mostly, but I wanted to be able to easily the other thing is I wanted to be able to easily access it. So sometimes if I'm, sitting in line somewhere or I'm in the car on a road trip, I can, look at my research if I'm kind of in the mood and I have an idea. So I think that's the main reason why I did it in a Google Doc. So, because there are times when I'll be out driving. I'm not driving. Right?
I'm about to say, wow, she's multitasking.
Let me clarify. But I'll be doing something and I'm in a position not behind a wheel. And I'll get an idea, and so I'll just go back to the Google Doc and write it down. And I have a notebook specifically for each project that I write stuff down in, but that's more of a now thing, and I always end up putting it in the Google Doc because I don't want to not have it handy if I need it.
I fully understand that. I'm kind of the same way. That's actually leading me into my next question. It's kind of more writer-centric. But, like, do you write your story in Google Docs, or, like, do you use a specific writer program? Because I know some authors swear by Google Docs. Some cannot stand it. Some swear, what is it? It's not, I want to call it Scribble. Scrivener. I was about to call it Scribble, and I'm like, it's not Scribble.
Scribble.
So, what makes you happy?
Honestly, I do Google Doc. I'm like simple that way. I didn't want to. I tried Scrivener, and for me, it wasn't it.
What, my cup of tea either.
And I think for me, like I said, I want to have it be accessible. There have been times where like I'm sitting waiting for a doctor's appointment, and I get an idea, and even if I just write a sentence, that is me writing. And I want to essentially always be able to access my story at all times. For that reason, if I have an idea, if I have, I need to write this sentence, if I have a snippet of dialogue that I want to put in, I want to be able to access it. And Scrivener for me just wasn't it. And it just felt, like I said, I'm a plotter, but that just felt too, that felt like a plotter's device. And I don't have time for that. Like I have a 9 to 5. I need it to be, my plotting needs to be simple, sleek. That's what I need.
I understand, because slight off topic, but when I looked at Scrivener, it made me feel intimidated. Like, I can't break my thoughts down like this. Like, I just want a place where I can put my thoughts and I can organize them. But I don't want to make a character sheet and like find pictures of real people for fictional people who live in my head. That's like, do you know how much of a rabbit hole that will be for me, and how much writing I will not get done? And also, in the free version, I don't even know if they have a free version. It's like a free trial, isn't it? Or something like that.
Yeah. That's the other thing, too. Google Docs is free, so...
Free and under is what we're here for.
And as a self-published author, baby, I need something that is free, because I have all these other expenses. But that's the other thing, too. I do also do character profiles for all of my characters, but it's more so just... in a Google Doc. I just write it out. I have a couple questions, it's to help me get in their mindset, but also to understand their history. When we talk about things that don't make it into the book, a lot of like the history and the things that I write in these character profiles don't end up in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But it's for me to better understand the character, their point of view, where they're coming from, how they make their decisions, because it's all informed by life experiences and things like that. But yeah, I'm not doing it in like a
Like
it
a
just
like a 10-point form.
no, I don't do a PowerPoint presentation for each character, you know.
I feel that. I feel that, like, on a spiritual level. So, but I like that you pointed that out, that there's, like you said, it kind of goes back to not just, world building, but also character building and everything that goes into the book. Like, you spend time with each element of it, and you know more about it than actually makes it to the page. And everybody uses the iceberg reference. I'm gonna use the iceberg reference because everybody knows what it is. But like the iceberg at the top that you see, that the Titanic hit, that is the part that is the finished product. But there's so much underneath the water that just lives rent free in our heads as authors. It's just kind of like it's there. Like any given day, you can actually. So, what's your character's birthday? And I can just rattle it off. If I don't know, I can make it up on the fly. And there you go. That's their birthday now. And
Yes.
it's fun. It's a unique experience to be that kind of creative, and for you to have done it not once but twice, but then also in like other short stories and other projects that you've got going on. Like, you're multi-talented, because a lot of self-published authors and indie authors, that first book is the one where the momentum hits, but it's kind of hard to keep it going. So props for keeping going and not hitting
Thank
that
you.
lull.
Yeah, honestly, I think the key is just to give yourself rest and to give yourself a break. I think for me, the trouble with some writing advice is very like, keep pushing, keep going, write 2,000 words a day. Oh, if you're not writing every day, you're not a writer. And to me, that is BS. That is BS on a cracker. That is no.
Not on a cracker.
Like, that is such bad advice, because like, what works for one person doesn't work for other people, and it's not taking into account people's own life. Like, yes, I'm a writer. I love writing. It's the only thing I can see myself doing as in my life. But I'm also a person. I'm also Amanda, who hates waking up early in the morning. I'm not waking up at 5 in the morning to write. I'm not doing that. Who has a 9 to 5 job that is also demanding. And there are days where I'm done with work and my brain hurts, and all I want to do is eat cookies in bed and watch TV. Like,
Yep.
there are days when I don't feel like it, but that does not make me any less of a writer. And I think it's about finding a schedule that works for you, honoring what works for you, and tuning out everybody else that has something to say about your process and what works for you. Because hey, I've written 2 books. I got a short story out. I'm doing YouTube. I'm working on another book now. So I guess my process is working for me. And so that's what matters.
Oh, yeah. And I will concur and say that finding a balance and getting rest, the advice to write every day, that's beautiful advice. Wonderful. If you're a full-time writer and you can do that, absolutely. And if you are someone who can manage their time really well and that's how your brain works, for sure, do it. But if you, like me, something I learned about myself is I am a chunk writer. If I sit down and I try to write every day, it ain't gonna happen, baby. It's just like, I will type something out, but I'm not gonna keep it because it's gonna be garbage. And not even like good garbage that you can tweak and turn into art. It's just like bad garbage that needs to go to the dumpster, right? So
yeah,
it's just like, but if I sit down and I'm like focused and I'm like, okay, I've got like 2 hours and I'm going to just like write, I can get like 2,000-3,000 words out and then be like, okay, I can keep this, I can work with this. So knowing yourself, giving yourself rest, and not shaming yourself for not writing every day, because let me tell you, those authors on Twitter are also not writing every day. They're on Twitter. Okay? That's how that works.
Yes. Yes. They're over here telling other people what they should be doing. They're not minding the business that pays them. They're trying to mind everybody else's business, and we don't do that here.
We don't do that here. We don't support that kind of lifestyle. But we are coming up on the 45-minute mark, so I have a couple more questions for you, and then we are going to wrap this up. If you guys are watching this live and there's anything that you want to ask Amanda, now is the time to drop it in the chat. And also, if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit the like button on this stream. It helps the YouTube algorithm gods be nice to us, and that's what we like. So, that being said, one of the things that I did want to ask you, well, I was going to ask you what advice you would give, but I feel like we just covered that. So, um, a couple other things that are book related, but not directly. I guess marketing your book, but you started a YouTube channel and a TikTok channel. Is it a TikTok channel or just a TikTok page? Like, what is it called? I am not hip to these things.
It's a TikTok.
It's a
like,
TikTok.
I don't know if it's a page or a channel. I throw up a video and hope for the best.
Got you. So, what was that like? What do you discuss on your YouTube channel? And I will link it for anyone who is watching it. Future Chelsea will give you a link to her channel so that you guys can go follow Amanda, because obviously you can see that she is amazing. So,
Thank you. So I don't like blogging. That's my truth, is that I realized I don't like blogging. And I know that, one of the marketing advice is to not just be beholden to your social media. It's, having your email list. It's doing some other kind of way to get your name out there, blogging, doing freelance stuff, whatever. And I discovered that for a writer, I don't like writing like book related things,
Yep.
I like to talk. I feel like I'm good on camera. It's probably the Gemini in me that I just like to bump my gums. So I thought, why not just do a YouTube channel? It seems like it could be something that could be fun, another creative outlet where I could talk about all the different things I enjoy. So on my channel, Amanda the Author with 2 E's, I talk about a range of things, but mostly in the fantasy and writing kind of spheres. So I give advice for writers, from marketing to my newest videos about world building in modern fantasy. So beyond the things we've discussed today, there are more tidbits there. I talk about tools that I love that have helped me in my writing. I also talk about books I love. I did a review on the Charmed reboot, which I had a lot of mixed feelings about, and I think most other people did as well. And I also do twice monthly a live stream called Lit Bitches with 2 other indie authors, and we talk about everything. We talk about last time BIPOC Fam Day. We talked about author self care. We'll be talking about that. We talk about diversity in book publishing. So, kind of talking about most things related to writing, and then also fantasy. It's October. It is my favorite month because it's spooky month, Halloween. So I will be doing some horror related content. As you can see, I have some horror stuff. I've got Exorcist and the Scary Stories book here. So I will be talking about a lot of spooky things coming up on my channel. So if you're into that, then go ahead and subscribe.
Awesome. And like I said, Salter EA dropped her how to spell it in the chat. It's Amanda the Author with 2 E's. So you should be able to search her and find her. But if you don't want to do that, I will add a link to the description box. Future Chelsea will do that, as well as add a link to the previous video where we talked about To Astera with Love. I'm just repeating this so when I replay it and I'm editing it, I remember to do these things. That being said, last question, because we've already covered what advice you would give. If you could have anybody who has not picked up one of your works before know anything about your books, what would it be?
Oh, the ultimate question. So I would say I wrote this book for people who I wrote this book for Black people. Let me just put that front and center. I wrote this is for us, by us. I did not want, this is not written for the white gaze. There's one white main character and he's trash. And that's it. It's not a white redemption story. He's not as much of a jerk in the second book, but he is trash, and I wrote him that way. This is for us, by us, and so that's what it is. I would say if you are somebody who likes contemporary fantasy, because I think there are a lot of people who prefer the epic high fantasy stuff, then that's cool. But if you like contemporary fantasy, I would check this out. If you like a little bit of humor, because that's my writing style, I include a lot of cultural references and humor mixed in with social commentary. So if you are also somebody who is down and enjoys that type of fantasy, I would say check this out. I think I've tried to be very nuanced in this and not make every single aspect of this book only about the struggle. I think, and I saw your tweet. You've mentioned this as well, where we have fantasy and things like that that is only about the struggle of our blackness or of our whatever. And this book is allegory, but there are other moments that aren't just them struggling against the powers that be.
Yeah.
So, and I wanted that. It's important because we're not just our struggle. We're joy. We're fun. We are the culture. We are the dominant culture right now. Like everybody's trying to emulate Black culture. So I wanted to make sure that I included that. That being said, if you like that, and also, like Chelsea mentioned, if you like reading fantasy where the characters aren't young adults, they're, not many adults, but
new adults.
They're new adults. They're young in their adulthood. They're old enough to drink, they're old enough to make decisions, but they're also still figuring out life. They're not, at that moment where they fully know themselves. So if you like that, then check these books out.
Yeah, and I will add to that, they're at the point where it's just like you are no longer under your parents' protection, because like when you're 18, 19, you still very much have, your safety net. But then as you deviate further from that, like 20, 21, 22, it's just like you're truly an adult. You're on your own for the most part, and you have to start standing on your own 2 feet. You can't just go home. And that's where these characters are figuring out their place in the world. Salter E said they can drink, but in this economy they might live at home still and need to drink about it. Honestly, let's talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, Mercury does live with his father, so there's that representation there. Mercury very much, he lives with his dad, and they have a great relationship, so it's cool.
Yeah. But that is it for this stream, you guys. For everyone who showed up, thank you so much for being here. Want to give a quick shout out to the patrons of Written in Melanin, because without them, this would not be happening, because I wouldn't be able to. So much appreciation for that. If you do want to look into that, there is a link to check out the Patreon down below. For sure, follow Amanda on all of her things. Buy her books. They're on the Melanin Library. Okay, they're real quick. Just click. All right, one click. I know you got the Amazon one click. Just go ahead and do that. Grab her books. Subscribe to her channel on YouTube. Follow her on Instagram, Twitter, because she is amazing and has really dope content. If you missed her BIPOC pictures, I feel bad for you. Go to Instagram, look at them, because they're gorgeous. And
thank you.
Want to let you guys know that the Written in Melanin podcast is coming back next year, just in case that's something that you are interested in. And it's going to be what we just did, Black people talking about Black books and authors talking about authorish things. It's going to be fun. That's going to be coming back in 2022, January. So, and I'm going to talk to Amanda to see if she'll come on the podcast. And if she says yes, you can look forward to that.
Yes. So, yes. I'm going to say yes. Right here. That's something future you does not have to do, because you already asked and I said yes.
Look at me checking off things in the future. Look at that. But that being said, that this is it for real for you guys. If you haven't already, please go ahead and like the stream, subscribe to the channel, because there is more content coming up. If you like author interviews, you can check out the previous one I did with Amanda to Astera with Love. There's also one with Antoine Bendelli where we talk about TJ Young and the Orisha, and I'm also talking about with Kimberly Lemming, not talking about her, talking with Kimberly Lemming about her book That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon, coming up in November. So subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications so you don't miss it, and that is it. So thank you guys for being here, and until next time, you guys, I hope your days are lovely and your books are interesting. Bye, you guys.